The laughter echoed through the conference hall. My brother, smug in his uniform, mocked me in front of decorated officers. She probably directs traffic on base. The room chuckled, even the general smiled. But I stood up, straightened my jacket, and the air went dead silent. Because what none of them knew was that the orders on that table, the ones that could change the course of the operation, had my name on them. The conference room buzzed with tension, the kind that clung to the air before a storm. Military banners hung from the walls, the smell of coffee and pressed uniforms mixing into a familiar scent of authority. High-ranking officers filled the long mahogany table, their decorations gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. I sat near the end, notebook closed, back straight, waiting quietly. I didn't need to say much. Not yet. That was when it happened. My brother leaned back in his chair, his voice carrying just loud enough for everyone to hear. She probably directs traffic on base, he snorted, eyes flashing with smug amusement. Laughter erupted. Not the loud belly laughs of true humor. No, it was worse. The restrained chuckles of men in uniform who didn't want to miss the chance to align with arrogance. Even the general at the head of the table cracked a faint smile before hiding it behind his hand. Heat rose to my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. I'd endured this my whole life. My brother, the golden boy, adored by our parents, showered with praise. Me. Always the shadow, the afterthought, the one people underestimated. I glanced at him calmly. He sat tall, uniform sharp, polished like a model soldier. To everyone here, he was the shining example. To me, he was the same insecure boy who never stopped trying to dim my light so his could shine brighter. The laughter faded, but the smirks lingered. One officer leaned to another, whispering something that made them both grin. I let the insult hang in the air, absorbing its weight like a soldier takes a hit. Painful, yes, but not fatal. Because what none of them knew was that I didn't direct traffic. I directed missions. Missions their careers depended on. The general cleared his throat. All right, gentlemen, let's proceed. But my brother wasn't finished. He leaned forward again, his voice dripping with condescension. Come on, sis. Don't look so serious. Lighten up. We all know why you're here. I tilted my head, meeting his eyes. Do we? A hush rippled down the table. For the first time, the laughter stuttered. My brother smirked, confident he'd won. But deep down, I felt the fire burn steady in my chest. Because this wasn't his arena. It was mine. And very soon, everyone in that room would know it. Long before the conference room and the sting of my brother's mockery, I'd already learned my role in the family. Background noise. Growing up, my brother Ryan was the star. From the moment he could walk, Dad called him the soldier. Mom dressed him in miniature uniforms, boasting to neighbors, my boy's going to lead the nation one day. Every report card, every trophy, every small accomplishment, celebrated like the world had never seen such brilliance. And me? When I brought home perfect grades, Mom barely looked up from her phone. Well, of course you did. You're supposed to. When I won the county science fair, Dad muttered, that's nice, before turning back to watch Ryan practice football. Ryan grew up spoiled not by money, but by validation. He was fed confidence like oxygen. I was fed silence, with the occasional reminder of my place. I still remember one Thanksgiving when I announced I'd been accepted into the military academy. For me, it was everything. The culmination of years of hard work, late nights, and relentless determination. But instead of pride, Mom frowned. Are you sure that's the right path? The military is hard. Maybe you should try teaching. Something safer. Meanwhile, Ryan had barely passed his entrance exams, yet Dad raised his glass and toasted, to Ryan, the future of this family's honor. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the acceptance letter. Their words hurt, yes. But underneath the pain, something else sparked, defiance. If they wouldn't believe in me, I would believe in myself enough for all of us. At the academy, I worked harder than anyone. While Ryan coasted on charm and connections, I bled in the dirt, sweated in silence, endured drills until my muscles screamed. And slowly, my record began to outshine his. But I didn't tell the family. I didn't flaunt it. I carried my victories quietly, like secret weapons. Ryan remained their golden boy, never realizing the shadow he thought was beneath him had grown taller. And now, years later, here we were, back at the same old story. Ryan laughing at me, a room full of people taking his side. Only this time, he wasn't laughing at a powerless little sister. He was laughing at a soldier who had earned her place at that table 10 times over. And when the truth came out, his laughter would choke in his throat. The academy was supposed to break me. That's what Dad had said when I left home. She won't last a month. She's too soft. Ryan laughed, clapping me on the back. Don't worry, Jess. Maybe they'll let you hand out water bottles on the sidelines. I carried those words with me on the bus that first day, stuffed into my duffel bag alongside my boots and uniform. They weighed more than the gear on my back. The training was brutal. Mornings began before dawn, with the sound of whistles and the bark of instructors. We ran until our lungs burned, marched until our legs trembled, drilled until our hands blistered and bled. I watched cadets tougher than me quit by the second week. But I didn't quit. I remembered every insult, every smirk from Ryan, every dismissive look from Dad. Each one became fuel. When my arms shook during push-ups, I whispered their voices in my head, and pushed out 10 more. When my lungs screamed on long runs, I pictured Ryan laughing, and sprinted harder. Slowly, something changed. The instructors noticed. My name began to appear on top of performance boards. Missions during field training always had my fingerprints on success. My peers began to look at me differently. Not as the quiet girl with a chip on her shoulder, but as the one who never broke, no matter how bad it got. By the time graduation came, I didn't just pass. I excelled. I walked across the stage with honors, my chest heavy with the weight of achievement. Ryan didn't even call. Dad sent a short text. Congrats. Anna's birthday party is this weekend. Bring chips. Even then, I stayed silent. Because silence was my weapon. I climbed higher. Special assignments came my way. Intelligence work. Logistics coordination. Operations where failure wasn't an option. Missions my brother didn't even know existed. Each success etched my name deeper into the military's foundation, though to my family, I was still Jessica, the background child. But I didn't care. Because when you build in silence, no one sees you coming. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Now, sitting in that conference room years later, with Ryan mocking me in front of generals, I felt the weight of all those years pressing against my chest. But it wasn't crushing, it was steel. I had endured the climb, step by agonizing step, while Ryan coasted on charm. And tonight, the truth would finally rise with me. Ryan thought I was still in his shadow. But what he didn't know was that I'd been standing above him all along. Back in the conference room, Ryan's smirk hadn't faded. If anything, the laughter he drew from the table only made him bolder. He leaned forward, tapping his pen on the table like a drumbeat of arrogance. Come on, sis, admit it. You're here because they had to fill a seat. No way you're leading anything important. Probably still checking vehicles at the gate. Snickers rippled again. One colonel shook his head with a grin. The general didn't laugh this time, but the corners of his mouth twitched. I sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, my expression unreadable. Years of discipline had taught me restraint. I could have lashed out, defended myself, reminded them of the commendations tucked in my file thicker than Ryan's entire career. But why waste breath? The sting of his words no longer pierced me. Instead, they sharpened me. Each insult was just another reminder of how blind they all were. Ryan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. She probably got lost on her way here and just happened to wander into the meeting. More laughter. But then the general cleared his throat, flipping through a folder in front of him. Enough games. We're moving on to the briefing. He glanced down the table. Colonel Jessica Hayes, you'll present the operational plan. The room froze. Ryan's smirk faltered, his eyes snapping toward me. Colonel? He whispered, as though the word tasted foreign in his mouth. I rose from my chair slowly, smoothing my jacket, my rank insignia gleaming under the fluorescent light. Silence swallowed the room. The same officers who had laughed moments ago now sat rigid, their eyes widening as realization dawned. I picked up the stack of documents in front of me, my voice steady and clear. Gentlemen, let's begin. And just like that, the laughter died. Because for the first time, they weren't looking at Ryan. They were looking at me. The projector hummed to life as I slid the first slide onto the screen. A satellite image filled the wall, sharp and detailed. covered in color-coded markers only I could explain. I spoke evenly, my tone precise. This operation involves 3 phases. Phase 1 is intelligence gathering. Phase 2 is logistics. Phase 3 is execution. Each phase requires coordination across air, ground, and cyber units. The room leaned forward. I clicked to the next slide. I'll be overseeing all of it. My team has been embedded for the past 6 months preparing this plan. We've run simulations, accounted for every risk, and designed contingencies for worst-case scenarios. Gentlemen, this mission's success depends on our discipline and precision. Not a sound. Gone were the smirks, the chuckles, the whispers. The officers who had laughed seconds earlier now scribbled notes, eyes fixed on me. Even the general's posture shifted. No longer amused, but attentive. Respectful. I caught Ryan out of the corner of my eye. His jaw was slack, his pen still in his hand, frozen mid-tap. The smugness had drained from his face, replaced by disbelief. "Colonel Hayes," the general said suddenly, cutting into my briefing. His voice held a weight it hadn't before. "This is exceptional work. Exactly the kind of leadership we need." A murmur of agreement spread around the table. Ryan finally found his voice, stammering. "Wait. You mean she's running this?" I turned my head slowly, meeting his eyes. "Yes, Ryan. I'm running this. Not directing traffic. Not filling a seat. Leading." His face flushed crimson. The officers shifted uncomfortably, their gazes bouncing between us like spectators at a duel. I returned my attention to the general, continuing the briefing as though my brother's outburst hadn't happened. Slide after slide, detail after detail, I laid out the plan with absolute control. And with every word, the power in the room shifted, away from Ryan, away from the laughter, and squarely onto me. By the time I closed the folder, the silence wasn't mocking anymore. It was reverent. When I set the final slide aside, the room sat in heavy silence. No one shifted, no one coughed, no one dared to break the spell. The general leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, studied me for a long moment before he spoke. "Colonel Hayes, this is among the most thorough operational briefings I've seen in years. Flawless preparation. Outstanding execution." A ripple of nods passed through the officers. Some scribbled more notes. Others simply watched me, their earlier mockery now replaced with a kind of cautious respect. But Ryan. He sat stiff in his chair, his knuckles white around his pen. The smirk that had decorated his face all evening had vanished, replaced by something rawer, disbelief. His eyes flicked between the general, the documents and me, as though searching for a loophole, a way to undo what he'd just witnessed. I kept my gaze on him as I spoke. "Gentlemen, this mission has been my responsibility for the past 6 months. My team answers directly to me. Every supply chain, every intelligence update, every troop movement, flows through my command." Ryan blinked, his voice cracking. "That's impossible." She's. The general cut him off, his voice firm. "Captain Hayes." His tone carried weight, the kind that silenced entire rooms. "Your sister is not only a superior officer. She has my full trust. I suggest you start showing her the respect she's earned." The room shifted again, officers straightening in their seats, eyes snapping back to me. Respect. Authority. Command. I rose slowly, smoothing my jacket. The insignia on my collar gleamed under the fluorescent lights, no longer invisible but undeniable. For years, I've been told I don't belong. That I'm weaker, softer, less capable. My own family laughed at me, doubted me, dismissed me. But while you celebrated yourselves, I worked. I climbed. I built something none of you could see. I took a step closer to Ryan. His face was pale, his chest rising and falling quickly. "You called me traffic control. A joke. But here's the truth. Without my orders, without my oversight, this mission doesn't leave the ground. Without me, you don't move an inch." Gasps whispered through the room. Ryan tried again, his voice trembling. But she. The general's glare cut through him. "Enough. I will not tolerate disrespect toward a commanding officer." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed calm. I don't need validation from this table. The results speak for themselves. My record speaks for itself. And after tonight, so does your silence. The officers exchanged looks, no laughter left, only realization. They had underestimated me, just as Ryan always had, and now they were choking on the truth. I turned to the general, saluting sharply. That concludes my briefing. He returned the salute, his eyes steady. Excellent work, Colonel. As I sat back down, Ryan's chair creaked under his shifting weight. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one casting the shadow. He was sitting in mine. The room was still charged when I sat down. The weight of my words lingered, thick enough to choke on. Officers avoided Ryan's eyes, their earlier laughter replaced with discomfort. Shame, even. Ryan gripped his pen so hard it snapped in his hand. The sound echoed like a gunshot. His face flushed crimson, jaw tight, eyes darting toward me as though searching for an opening. Don't listen to her, he stammered. She's exaggerating. She can't outrank me. She's my little sister, for God's sake. The general's fist hit the table, making the coffee cups jump. Enough, Captain. His voice cut through the air like a blade. You will remember yourself. Colonel Hayes outranks you. She has my confidence, and after that briefing, she damn well should have yours too. Gasps. Then silence. Ryan's mouth opened but no sound came. His pride, years of smug superiority, lay in tatters on the floor. I stood again, slowly, deliberately. The entire room turned toward me, waiting. I could feel their eyes on me, the shift of power complete. I stepped closer to Ryan, close enough that only he could see the fire in my eyes. My voice was calm, almost gentle, but sharp enough to cut him in two. You spent your whole life mocking me, Ryan. Every achievement I had you laughed at. Every time I fought harder, you told people I didn't belong. You built your ego by tearing me down. I leaned in slightly. But here's the thing about shadows. They only exist when there's light. And tonight, I am the light. He froze, eyes wide. The words hit harder than any scream could. I straightened, turning to the officers. Gentlemen, if we're finished, I'll begin coordination with my team immediately. Time is critical. The general nodded firmly. Dismissed, Colonel. Excellent work. Chairs scraped as men twice my age stood out of respect. Salutes snapped into place. My heart pounded, but my face remained steady as I returned each one. And then I walked. Past the mahogany table, past the banners, past the officers who just hours ago thought I was nothing. My boots echoed against the floor, each step heavier than the last, until I reached the door. But before I left, I turned back one last time. Ryan still sat frozen, pale and small in the chair he once thought was his throne. Next time you laugh at me, I said evenly, remember this moment. Remember who the room stood for. Silence. No one breathed. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the corridor, the sound of it closing behind me final, absolute. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the sibling mocked in the shadows. I was the one they all followed. And Ryan? He was just the punchline of a joke that had finally ended.